But who is the spiritual mother from whose loins you must spiritually burst forth? God is supposed to be the father, but who is the mother? Asherah? Yahweh had a thing with her a while ago, if I recall correctly.
It's not a matter of enough to say that you're part of the synagogue or that you go to church or that you've been religious. Part of the issue is, have you been born again?
Ah, so this is one of those lukewarm Christians versus true Christian sermons that is designed to guilt people into believing her. Gotcha.
The Lord Jesus makes it clear to Nicodemus that this whole idea of becoming Christian is not something that we have in the power of our hands to do.
I mean, I kind of agree. We don't choose whether or not we are convinced. We can't just decide to be Christians, I think, or any other religion for that matter, or to not be any religion.
To be born again, it's not something that you don't do something to make yourself born again. Being born again is a supernatural operation of God's Holy Spirit.
So, being born again is a C-section performed by the Holy Spirit or performed on the Holy Spirit? Is the Holy Spirit the woman of the trio?
He comes upon you when you're not looking for him or seeking him.
That sounds not good. You just made it quite clear that it's non-consensual, like the entire time. That's just gross.
Make that very clear. He says in verse 8, he says, the wind bloweth where it listeth, and is where it wills.
Okay. This is something that I really don't understand about people who insist on using the King James Version. I get that from a cultural perspective, the King James is an important translation, but often people believe that the King James is the only legitimate English translation of the Bible, but then when reading from it, they have to explain in modern English what is meant by some of the archaic language. Why is it okay in these people's minds for a preacher to literally retranslate the verse on the fly, but the modern scholars who actually know what they're doing when they're translating these ancient languages aren't allowed to retranslate the whole book to put it in words that modern readers can understand? Now, I don't actually recall if Pastor Dickey was a KJV-only preacher, but I do know that oftentimes people who are insistent on the King James are also insistent on a literal interpretation of Genesis and the idea that the entire Bible is inerrant. I do know that Pastor Dickey does hold both of those positions. But then, they never seem to believe in unicorns, despite unicorns being mentioned several times in the KJV, as though they are real creatures. They usually want to explain how unicorns are actually rhinos, but then if the KJV were the perfect translation, why would it not just say rhinoceros instead of unicorn? Rhinoceros has been the English word used to describe rhinos since at least the 1300s, 300 years before the King James Version was translated. So it stands to reason that if unicorns were rhinos, they wouldn't have called them unicorns when they had an actual word for a rhino.
Now here's the sounder. It's not how where to go and where you're going. So is everyone that is born of the Spirit.
That was clearly heavy at the time when we didn't really understand wind. We know where wind comes from now. To oversimplify it a bunch, it's basically the result of atmospheric pressure differentials. As to where it goes, it's not like it has a particular destination in mind, but generally it goes from the high-pressure system to the low-pressure system. Now, of course, Jesus was being all metaphor-y, but also, Jesus was supposed to literally be God. You'd think he could take some time out of his busy schedule to impart some scientific knowledge that would help us while he was here. But no, instead he used the people's general lack of scientific knowledge to speak in flowery metaphors that would look silly once we learn how things, actually work.
There are 66 books in the Bible, individual books. 39 in the Old Testament, 27 in the New, 66 altogether, written by over 40 different authors over a period of 1,500 years.
See, now there's another problem. I know that Pastor Dickey would be of the opinion that the Bible is given to us pretty much directly from God, and would agree with the Bible verse that says that all Scripture is God-breathed. Now, if the all-powerful creator of the universe has an important message that he wants to pass down to us, let's just grant for the moment that, for whatever reason, he can't just write the book himself. But the Bible isn't exactly a big enough book that it would have been impossible to have been written by one author. So why did God give the first 5 books to Moses, but then wait until a few centuries later to give us some of the other books? When, sure, a bunch of the books are quasi-historical records, But why is a part of the important message that God has for all of humanity the history of a very specific ancient Near Eastern tribe? And whatever message he wanted to use these historical events to impart, could he not figure out a way to impart that message without having to wait for the event to happen first? I can maybe understand why you would want to split up between the Old and New Testament, because Jesus did change a few things around, even though he literally said that he wasn't changing anything. But actually, you know what? Even that, why would God wait several thousand years at least before doing the sacrifice thing in the first place? If that is truly the only way to obtain salvation, and God actually wanted as many people as possible to be saved, then Jesus should also have been buried, and Jesus would have done his thing right away.
And yet through all this, there are no contradictions in this book.
Oh, there aren't? Really? Okay. Ezekiel 18:20 says, "The Son shall not suffer for the iniquity of the Father. The Father suffer for the iniquity of the Son." Exodus 20:5 says, "For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers on the children to the third and fourth generations." It doesn't get much more contradictory than making a statement that is explicitly opposed to one of your earlier statements. But there are also more subtle contradictions, like when Saul first meets David after being troubled by the spirit that God was torturing him with, and when his servants found David to be really skilled at playing a liar, David was brought to Saul. For him, Saul came to love him greatly, to the point where there can be some debate about whether or not David and Saul had a romantic relationship, which adds a whole new dynamic to the definitely romantic relationship that David had later in this book with Saul's son Jonathan. But no matter how we're interpreting this relationship, they were definitely close enough to make the question in the next chapter about who David
Oh, so you had top
is
right.
after he killed Goliath.
So you just straight up fucking lied to me, okay?
And those are just the two that came to mind immediately. If I tried to, I could come up with a lot more.
On this whiteboard, what I'm going to do is I'm going to condense the meaning of the Bible, this complex book, 66 books, all of its doctrines, all of its presuppositions and things that teach. I'm going to condense it into a series of little diagrams I'll put on this whiteboard to help articulate verbally and visually what the plan of salvation is all about.
What is with apologists doing stuff like this? Like, seriously, they will bring the Bible is the perfect book for everything in life. But then they'll go on to explain how the Bible didn't quite get its message across as perfectly as it could, so let me just summarize it here for you. Now, if the Bible is perfect, then you wouldn't need to give the condensed version where you cut out all the unnecessary bits. The Bible would only have the necessary bits. Otherwise, it's not perfect.
And if you walk away saying, I'm totally confused, I have no idea what he's talking about, I've got to go back to the drawing board and figure out what am I doing wrong here.
Or, and hear me out here, but it might not be a problem with your presentation of the idea, it might be a problem with the idea itself. Because that was one of the things that I noticed when I became an atheist. When I wasn't ignoring the problems and absurdities with God's plan, or even the conflicting ideas of God both having a plan and allowing us free choice, the problems and absurdities became much more obvious, and the story sounds much more nonsensical.
When we talk about salvation, we have to begin with the concept of God.
Yeah, like, what even is God? Does the God concept make sense in a Christian framework? I would argue, no. At least not the God concept that modern Christians mostly have. The Bible paints a picture of a fallible God who might be the supreme being, but can still make mistakes. He has regrets. He can't always win battles for you. These concepts, tied with the idea that God is all-powerful, all-knowing, and all-present, make the modern concept of the Christian God a logical impossibility.
And what I like to do is I draw a triangle at the top of this diagram here. And the triangle is simply this. We have two sides to this triangle, and it represents the Trinity. We have the Father, and we have the Son, and we have the Holy Spirit.
Yes, how creative. Gold star. You figured out no three-sided shape can be used to represent the three gods in your religion that are actually one god. Trust me, it works. Just think about it.
The Bible teaches us that there is one God. We worship only one God, that He is a Trinity.
So, how does that work? Do they all have the same abilities? Are they three separate, not omnipotent entities, but when you add their individual powers together, they add up to omnipotence? Do they have different experiences or temperaments? How could that be if they are all omnipresent? Or are they not all omnipresent? When Jesus was talking to God in Gethsemane, were either of them imparting new information to the other that they didn't previously have, making at least one of them not omniscient? If they are all omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipresent, then why the need for three? Are any of them fallible? If so, then God is not infallible, but if not, then again, why the need for three? All three know what actions they're going to take in advance. They're not going to make mistakes about it, and they can't change each other's minds about things, except when they can in the Bible, when God changes Jesus' mind about going through the crucifixion thing. Yeah, we've only just gotten to defining what God even is, and we're already in the realm of incoherence. And I feel like marijuana would have been better here than alcohol, but it's too late to change that now.
That's a great mystery. You can understand this great mystery of one God revealing Himself in three persons.
Ah, yes, the good old appeal to mystery. Everything that I tell you is going to make sense by the end of my whiteboard presentation. But I know that there's a bunch of incoherence wrapped up in the very first thing I draw on the whiteboard, so let's just start off by acknowledging the incoherence, appeal to God's mysterious ways, and move on as though that should be a satisfactory answer.
These three persons of the Godhead are co-equal.
When we're talking about the omni characteristics of God, the co-equal statement makes them literally